saw it when it was first posted and I was waiting for it to drop. So as soon as it dropped, I grabbed it. And I went, ooh, history. The question is, what was your inspiration for this story? Because you've written a novel before. So I don't know if you're a children's writer. From what I've read about you, you're an editor, you write short stories too. So what was your inspiration for this book?
Well, it's funny. Yes. So first of all, I want to just quickly say that I saw you post Crowning Glory on Facebook, and I think I got a copy of it because I have to look because I have so many books here that I've been ordering, and it's a very busy season, so I haven't read anything that I've recently bought. But I love the concept of the book. I think it's such a smart idea, and I think so many kids, especially African kids, Black kids, need a book like that because we don't realize how much our hairstyles say about our culture, and also it is so communal. Like you said, you have someone you're sitting down getting your hair braided, surrounded by women, and you're there all day or for many hours, and it's just such a beautiful experience that is so unique to us. But in any event, all of this to say that Blue, I also was not a children's book author. It wasn't something that was on my radar at all. And what happened was I had been working on my novel for adult readers and was just having a really hard time selling the book. It was years and years of rejection. I was feeling super frustrated, and so that's just kind of where my headspace was. And I was reading the Bible. I was reading about King Solomon's temple furnishings. Okay. And it mentioned that there was a veil in the temple that was blue, red, and purple. And I wondered why it mattered. I actually didn't even notice the red and purple. The blue was what jumped out at me. And I said, what does this matter? So initially I just started Googling, okay. And I found that in antiquity, there was a snail, which is in the book, the Murex trunculus snail, that people would, ancient societies would harvest for the blue dye that it secreted. Okay. And so I thought to myself, what? This doesn't make any sense. Is Google just messing with me? So I found a book, a really incredible book. It's called The Rarest Blue by Baruch and Judy Sturman.
The Rarest Blue. Okay.
It's called The Rarest Blue, and I read that book, and it was more like a memoir, and also very thorough history of the color. And I was like just bowled over by how much significance blue played in history. Okay. And so I had actually a friend of mine, her name is Catherine McKinley. She had written a book called Indigo, which she wrote during her Fulbright in Ghana. And she so basically her focus was on the importance of indigo in West Africa. So she traveled to Nigeria, she was in Ghana, and I believe she traveled to another West African country. And also just making the link to the both the trans-Saharan and the transatlantic slave trades. And I reread the book because now, having read Baruch and Judy Sturman's book, I was like, whoa. And I really appreciated Catherine's focus on the West African economy, what blue was to the economy. Okay. And how it factored into the slave trade. So anyway, as I was reading all of this, I said to myself, wow. I mean, it totally just transformed the way I looked at the color blue and the way that I looked at the world, because color in antiquity was produced through natural means. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of awakened me, to all of the fact that in nature, all of these things are hidden, And so I thought to myself, what if kids knew about this? Kids need to know about this, because if they did, I think it would change the way they relate to the color that is just in their crayon box or, in their watercolor set.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a poem, really. And I just kind of put it away, but I felt this really pressing, compelling need to just get this book out there to kids. So I started pitching children's book publishers. I pitched through my agent initially, and then ultimately straight to children's book agents and publishers. And all of them, like your experience, it was too long. But one gentleman who is now my agent, he said he took me on. We had a great meeting about the book. And then he's a children's book agent, so he knows what is needed. So he just told me, like, okay, this is what you need to fix. And then we sold it. And yeah, and that was what inspired it. And I know I went all around, but I answered also how the book came to be.
Okay. Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. You know, when I saw the book, when I saw Blue, and I read through it, I'm happy that you mentioned Nigeria, because indigo dyeing is very, very popular in the northern part. That's kind of, yes. I think I think it has I think those are the oldest dyeing pits we have in West Africa.
Yes.
It's called Kofarmata. Yeah. Kofarmata, that's what that place is called. And then it moved, I think so. I don't know how it moved to the west, because now it seems to be really, really popular among the Yorubas.
Yeah,
indigo dyeing and all of that. Then I looked at the book, and look, whoever this illustrator is, this Daniel Minter, I would love to work with him. Honestly, he did an amazing job. He did an amazing job bringing the story to life. And what is it with the hands? Because that's something I kept noticing. In the beginning, the hands are reaching for the skies, and then, water. But there's just this significance of, the hands.
Yes.
What's it with the hands? I don't know if I should be asking you that question, or I should be asking.
I know. A fun fact that I didn't know before I started this process is that illustrators and authors do not work together on children's books. We hand off the words to the illustrator, and the illustrator is left free to interpret it as they wish. And so I had never met Daniel Minter. I did not know his work. I mean, I knew they showed me, his work, but when I saw the images, I was in tears. I mean, just such beautiful, beautiful work. Now, we did one interview together, and he spoke about the hands, actually. And what he said was that, because he's illustrated other children's books before. Okay. And he said that in the case of Blue, he found it interesting that there was no main character, right? The character was Blue. The
Blue,
color.
yes.
Versus, like a traditional children's book, which has a protagonist. Yeah. And so he said that what he found was a through line of the book is that the color is just being passed. It was a very tactile experience. The color is being passed down or through generations, or even the way it's made is a very manual process. Yes. And so he talks about that, and so that's why the hands. But I mean, even that thinking to me was just so powerful, because when I had written the book, I imagined more of it being about water. Okay. Because in a way, like, I felt like the way the color kind of builds an intensity, like the idea of, like, when you put your hands in the ocean, it's clear. But then when it's all together, it's a color. It's the color, blue or whatever. So I was thinking of it in that sense, and I think he made it so much richer. He brought than I imagined it could be. He brought so much depth, and so it makes me glad that I didn't sort of download to him my vision of what the visuals would be,
Okay.
He did an incredible job. It's such a blessing to have been paired with him.
Oh, that's great. Because maybe because I self-published my first 2 children's books, I'm a very visual person. So anytime I work with an illustrator, I find myself, I will always write illustration notes. I'll tell you what I see in my head, and then I'll let the illustrator take it from there.
Yeah.
Because many times when I write, I see, you know how for me, because I'm a visual person, I already know what I want on that page, or what I would like to see on that page. So I find myself going back and forth a lot with illustrators saying, no, I think you should tweak this a bit. I think you should take this out. I think you should add this and you should add that. But for you to say that writers and illustrators don't work together, and then to get this kind of amazing product.
I know.
Wow. Yeah. This doesn't happen that often.
Yeah.
It doesn't. And it took me on the journey with this blue, because it started, the color blue is all around us. Have you ever wondered where it comes from? It's in the sky, but you can't touch it. It's in the sea, but when you cup it, it disappears. You can crush iris petals for a brilliant shade, but just add water and away it fades. But then blue appears in the strangest places, discovered through history in unexpected ways. I like the way you started it. For me, you started it in an open space, and then you brought it down.
Yeah.
And then you brought it back home. As early as 4,500 BC, diggers found blue rocks called lapis lazuli in mines deep below Afghanistan. How important do you think it is because this book, I don't know if I should call this now, because you touched on different parts of the world in this story. But how important do you think it is for children to see themselves reflected in books? Because this book, even though we have majority of the characters are Black kids, we also have people of other cultures mentioned.
Yeah.
But blue is a color that is relatable to everyone in the world. One way or the other, it touches on it. You would find that you've come across blue in one aspect of your life.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, first of all, one of the things that when I was doing this research, and researching other colors, one of the things that I found shouldn't surprise us, but of course, every person, every being has a relationship to the world around them. So it makes sense that, the sky is above the whole world. If you're in a place where there is an ocean, you have a relationship to it. You have a thought about it. You have an idea. So every culture has that. And I thought to myself, when I was reading both Baruch Sturman's and then Catherine McKinley's sort of focus on West Africa, how important it is that we really pay attention to the fact that it's not just one type of person who is having an experience with it. And I think that, we tend to read histories that are focused on one section of the world or from one perspective. And it was really important to me to have a global perspective, or as global as it could be, without sort of making the story feel too, feel all over the place. It was really important to me. And what I found in taking the book to schools is that kids just light up when they find that you've mentioned their country or you've mentioned their culture. I mean, it's amazing. I went to one school and I love the girl. One student corrected me, my pronunciation of Bangladesh. And I was so happy. It was a second grade class. She says, it's not Bangladesh, it's Bangladesh. And I'm probably mangling it. But I was so glad that she did that, because I think when you expose, and in that setting, and her classroom was quite diverse, but in that setting, it gives everyone a feeling of, one, ownership of their culture, and also of being seen, And that was important to me, because I know that when I was a kid, I wanted to be seen. And when I read books, I didn't necessarily process it that way, but I didn't find myself. And then when there were books about Black characters, which I loved, it would mostly be about African American. And I loved those because being born in the US, I definitely related to them. But when I grew up and started reading books that were set in Africa, in West Africa in particular, it was just a different experience altogether. It felt validating. So yeah, that was very important to me, to make it feel global.
Okay. You know, when I spoke about the importance of seeing children seeing themselves reflected in books, I know that growing up, because Nigeria was colonized by the British, so the education system is British. So growing up, we had a lot of British literature that was a staple in our education. So I grew up reading, and then with that we also had, we had all the Lady Bird series. Then after some time we had Enid Blyton's. But I remember when I got to secondary school, there was this set of books by, I think they're out of print now, by I think Heinemann books. They were called Pace Setters.
Yeah.
There were these Pace Setter novels, you know, the covers would usually have all these garish kind of drawings, but the books were set in Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, love stories and all of that. And I used to say to myself then that once I finish secondary school, I would like to get published by those people. Yeah. But by the time I finished, the books had gone out of print.
Yeah. The Heinemann, I didn't read Pace Setters, but the Heinemann African Writers series and Longdon's as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was just, I think every sort of person around our age has a relationship to that series, and I'm so glad that they did it. And it's heartbreaking that series went out of print, but and in the absence of it, it took a very long time before we saw like the resurgence that we're seeing now.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's great that we are having books now by we're having all this kind of, you know, some people say we shouldn't use the word BIPOC because they say if you say we are people of color, it means there's just one authentic color. So it's just to say Black people, white people, indigenous people. Yeah. Just say it as it is. I'm happy we are having stories. I'm happy that we are having Black stories, and I'm happy that I'm also part of the people putting out Black stories. How important do you think it is for Black stories to be told by Black authors?
I think it's very important because I think with respect to something like your book, Crowning Glory, I think that somebody who is not intimate with the culture would not even think about that. So they might, and I don't think there's any, I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think the fact that you have that perspective is so important because in a young person who will ultimately, you know, pick up that book will be downloaded with all the things that we experience when we get our hair done, and we'll know that it's linked to a history and a culture, and this is something to be proud of. Whereas somebody who appreciates the culture and, you know, notices the same thing, notices the fact that, wow, there are all these cool different hairstyles in Africa, they may appreciate it, but they may not understand the nuances of it. And I don't think that means that person should not attempt to write about it. They should learn and do all those things, and their perspective has value as well. But I think there's nothing quite like the person who is immersed in it and knows it intimately, sharing that story.
I agree, because I feel that there is the authenticity of experience and knowledge. And that, above everything, is very, very different from the questionable authenticity of theory. You know, there's a difference between what people think Black people experience and what Black people know they have experienced. Yeah. There is a difference.
I mean, I think it's very complicated because, you know, Blackness and whiteness is so loaded with history. You know, I mean, there's just centuries and centuries of weight attached to, you know, the race. So I think that it's challenging when a white person comes in and writes about Black culture. I think on some level there's a sort of a knee-jerk reaction to it, because it's like, wait a minute, you have, even if you are not a rich white person, you still come in with a certain power, and you still come in with a certain privilege. And so the privilege and the power is one side of it, and then there is, what is your motive? Why are you doing this? Because we as Black people, and I don't want to speak for every Black person, but many Black people have experienced the well-meaning white person still completely misunderstanding us, disrespecting us, even though they mean well. So it is possible for a white person to write well about our culture, because I want to be careful, because I want to be able to write about white people or Indian people or Asian people, because I think that we're all human beings, and if you have empathy, sensitivity, and you know, the wherewithal to kind of work through, you know, your biases and what have you, you can create something beautiful. And I do think that while there is so much power in writing from an intimate perspective, I think that there is something to be learned from people who come from outside, because they see things that you may not see because you're so inured to it. So I think there is value in it. But all of that being said, the person who is coming in as an outsider, writing about a culture that is not native to them, really has a lot of work to do. And it's only if you're willing to do that work should you attempt, in my opinion.
I think so. Yeah, I understand. I think so too. But I also think that if you're going to write about another culture, you should do it also with caution.
Yeah.
Don't come in with authority. So I think that, when you're writing certain things like that, especially if it's of a culture that is not yours, you have to do it with caution, and you have to mind your language.
And I think part of the problem too is that we go back to the privilege, because it's really hard as a Black person to get published. I mean, it's hard for anyone to get published, but for a Black person, it's very difficult. And so, because a white person is probably more likely to get a book deal with a major publisher, you know, whereas maybe there've been many books by Black authors on the same topic, but maybe they didn't get it with a big publisher who has the capability to disseminate the book widely, distribute the book widely. So all of those things come into play, and so therefore it's like we're back at that question of, until we get to a place where, you know, a plethora of Black voices are able to get out there and have our say, it feels like at this time you might need to take a seat, or you know, and just kind of take a listen, because even if, like I said, I have to acknowledge that it's hard for all writers to get published, but you have to acknowledge, if you're a white person, yes, it's still easier for you, and for you to be writing about a Black topic, it feels like a slap in the face. It's received as a slap in the face by others who have been writing about this forever, but just haven't been able to get that opportunity that you have.
Yeah, that's very true. So what are some of the challenges Black authors experience when they're trying to get published? Especially since we're focused on children's books, what are some of the challenges Black authors encounter when they're trying to publish, to get their books published? Like you, what are some of the challenges you experienced?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I can't speak for everyone because I'm new to the children's publishing game. And I actually, count so many, I mean, there are many Black children's book authors that I can sort of name whom I really admire, like Jason Reynolds and Kwame Alexander and Jacqueline Woodson and Renee Watson. I mean, it seems like there are a lot of, and I don't want to say this to mean that, you know, it's not hard to get published as a Black person to write in the children's book space, but I see a lot of names that are so inspiring. So it feels exciting that, you know, in the children's book space, they are more aware and more woke, if you will. For me, I think overall, I've been at this, my first book, Powder Necklace, came out in 2010, and I had been pitching that book for several years as well. I think what is difficult is, one, getting a literary agent, or it was back in the day. Very difficult to get a literary agent who will sign on. And when I was pitching, many times I heard, oh, I have a client that is also Black, basically. So I'm like, okay, so that means you can only have one, you know what I mean? And it was really difficult to get representation. And once you have representation, then that's when you are able to kind of just, you know, send your book to a publisher or what have you. So that was, you know, Powder Necklace again came out in 2010. So that was over a decade ago. I think the challenges, the challenges are nuanced. It's now that, you know, so sadly, George Floyd's death led to, it's so sad that a man had to die so brutally and so publicly and so horribly for there to be an awakening in the system. And so I think that right now we're seeing a lot of publishers and literary agents seeking Black voices and seeking, you know, that work. And I think that now I pray that it continues long after this. Like, this won't just be a moment. It won't be like, okay, the Heinemann and the Longman African Writers series, they go on for 20 years and then that's it. Or, you know, there was a time when Terry McMillan and Elin Harris and, you know, so many, you know, Black writers were out there in the 90s, and then that also went away. I pray that this is something that is sustained, and that we can get to a place where there is a lot of nuance in the work, so that they're not just looking to Black writers to write about race, or they're not just looking to Black writers to write a specific kind of story, but that we will be like just everybody else, just able to just write, you know?
Yes, we hope that a time comes when people are free to tell authentic stories. Because I remember when I sent off my submissions because I'm in Canada, to publishers who said they are seeking BIPOC stories, and I kept getting rejections. And I found one of the editors on LinkedIn, and I just sent her a message to say, hello, I sent my submission to you guys, and I just want to know the status. And she said, what's the title? What's your name? I gave to her. And she came back to me and said she was able to find the editor who reviewed it. And that, yes, we agree. I agree that we're looking for books by authors of Black, Indigenous, and Indigenous descent. But the truth is, we're looking for stories that are Canada-based. And I'm thinking, yes, I'm thinking, you want me to tell an authentic story. I am African, I'm Nigerian. My authentic story is what I know. So if I just tell a story about a child in Nigeria, I personally feel it will appeal to African children in Canada, and also an excellent opportunity for non-African children, you know, to have an idea of what the experience of being a Nigerian child is, or a child growing up in Nigeria. You don't want to talk about window and mirror stories.
Yeah.
These sliding door stories, it gives you the opportunity to step into the world of that child.
Absolutely. And you know something that is really frustrating, that feedback, because one, we have grown up, like you said, when you were in Nigeria, you were reading Enid Blyton, and you were reading books by, and I grew up reading, Sweet Valley High.
I did that in high school.
Yeah, I mean, so this idea that somebody in one culture cannot read a book based or set in another country or culture is so frustrating. And it is, I mean, those are the ways that, those are the walls that remain or exist right now that we really have to break down. And I think that goes to, I think any person who is, if you were the editor, and that book came through, you would already know that, like, you already know intimately that there is an audience for that book.
Yes.
And you know that it could be a kid that's never left Canada who would love that book because they come from a culture and they live in a community that is anchored in, their culture. And so I think that we do need more diversity in the editorial space, in the publishing space. We really, really need people who would know that instinctively, and that wouldn't be a leap for them to understand.
Yeah, I think so too. Because I was wondering, okay, so what kind of authentic Black story can I tell as a child, as a person who grew up in Nigeria? So are you indirectly asking for a safe story? That was my thought. But yeah. I went, okay. I said, for me, I appreciated the feedback, because some people wouldn't give you any feedback, and you find yourself wondering, what is it I did? Would I have written it better? So I'm going back to your book Blue, and I am looking at another thing I could pick from here is I like the connection. So you connected it with life, where you spoke about the sky, water. Then you connected it also with petals, and then you connected it with history when you went, Afghanistan, Egypt. You connected it with spirituality, where you spoke about the Himalayas, people in Indonesia. Some say special prayers to ward off evil spirits before they make die. And then it came to wealth, where you spoke about Queen and makeup, Queen Beauty, Queen Cleopatra VII, were applying a bluish mixture around their eyes that looked like eyeshadow, made with ground lapis lazuli grains, plant and animal fats. So it continued, and then I was surprised when I came across slavery here. And I'm like, oh, really? I thought, because I tell people that the experience of blackness for those of us born and raised in Africa is different from the experience of blackness for those of you born and raised here. It's very different. Because when you're growing up back home on the continent, you're just another regular African. But when you move abroad, you now realize, I'm black and I speak with an accent. Mm-hmm. So my assumption was that the people who were captured from back home and taken to the Americas were taken for different reasons. Some were to pick cotton, and some were to farm sugarcane. But when I saw it here, where you brought in slave trade, I was very, very surprised. And I went, I didn't know that in parts of Africa, some merchants use strips of indigo cloth to buy people and sell them into slavery. In India and Bangladesh, some planters tricked or forced poor farmers to grow indigo plants instead of food. In the United States, some made the African captives they had enslaved farm indigo, calling the plant a cash crop because it brought in a lot of money. In this evil side of the trade for blue, leaders and landowners around the world abused or enslaved countless people just so they could grow more indigo.
Yeah.
So now blue has gone from life to spirituality to wealth, now to evil.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I really, when I first, what really struck me when I started doing the research on the history of the color was just, to me, it was a story about humanity and how we what lengths we go to get something that we want.
Yeah.
And it starts off, a beautiful thing, an innocent thing, and oftentimes it can end up in exploitation and brutality and wickedness and greed. Because one of the things when I talk to kids is that, like, okay, when it comes to lapis lazuli, or when it comes to the snail, first of all, the lapis lazuli, to get the blue out of that, was backbreaking work. You have to mine the rocks, you have to break them up, you have to crush them. I mean, that's backbreaking work, right? And then when it comes to the snail, it's easier work, but the yields are very small.
Yes.
And it's also very, so you have now a way to get the desired blue. If you have the land, you can get as much as you want. But instead of people saying, oh, this is great, now we don't have to do this backbreaking work, or now people are actually brutalizing people and exploiting people. Yeah. And so we have conversations about greed, and I love that. I love that. One student said to me, she said, do you mean to tell me that just to get the color blue, people were enslaving people? And I love that she asked that question and she made that connection. And then we could talk about that. What are the things in life that you want, and what are you willing to do to get it? And where is your line, to say no, and also to the dichotomy. I think kids know this, and we all know this as human beings, but the dichotomy of beauty and, ugliness, the fact that all things sort of can be double-edged or double-sided. So I wanted to really engage that as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And I like that you came in, before, because when I got to that, I went, okay, is this story going to end in sorrow? And then you said from the time blue was found, scientists worked hard to make a blue that was not so difficult or cruel to produce. And I went, okay, that felt good. And I like that you said, you explained that it's a story about humanity. So I like how you brought it in. You brought everything into emotions, where you said you're talking about feeling blue. And finally, everyone, not just the wealthy, could afford something blue, but it was always about more than having a blue outfit, piece of jewelry, or work of art. Because of its scarcity, mystery, and holy association, blue was more than a color. It was a feeling. And the image here.
Oh, I know.
The image. I don't know if anybody can see it. Yeah, the image here. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. We feel blue when we are sad, perhaps because the people who had to dig, grind, and grow passed down their painful memories of working the mines or of slavery on indigo plantations. Africans enslaved in America sang prayers that sounded like tears. The songs were called spirituals, and they inspired a style of music called the blues, originally known for its aching words and melodies. We feel excited when something happens out of the blue, perhaps because the color was once so rare, a discovery that seemed to appear out of thin air. How were you able to tie it into all of this?
To be honest with you, that, to me, like I said, when I was doing the research, what was emerging for me was this sort of, we see this in humanity, right? With anything that is coveted. I mean, we know this, some of us know about the story of diamonds and how, how many people have been brutalized because of, diamonds. And it gets to the place where it's not even about the actual thing anymore. It's about how that thing makes you feel and what having that thing will make you feel like, and how it, it attaches status and all of the things that we as human beings are after, right, in life. So to me, that was the story. Like, as I was working through it, I was like, wow, you could pick any item or any desirable, coveted item in the world, and I think the story would be the same,
Yeah, because I'm looking at the last page here. Maybe because blue has such a complicated history of pain, wealth, invention, and recovery, it's become a symbol of possibility. As vast and deep as the bluest sea, and as wide open and high as the bluest sky.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it ended on I choose to call it ending on a high note, which I think is great. Yeah, it's a great book. So, yeah, what advice would you give people trying to find a literary agent? Like, I have been trying to find a literary agent since 2004.
Yeah.
The closest I got to was one saying, "I like your work, but I'm not in love with it."
Oh, wow.
Yes, then, in putting together this podcast, I interviewed an acquiring agent at Macmillan, and she said to me that Twitter can help. And I went, Twitter? I'm not really good with Twitter. And she said, sometimes there are pitch wars where you just go and pitch your book and use a hashtag. And I went, okay. So I tried it out last week. And I was very, very surprised. I had, 2 agents and 1 editor put hearts on my pitch, against my pitch. Wow. Yes, and they say when they do that, quickly go to their pages, check for their submissions guidelines, and send it off your submission.
I think what I would say is submit widely. Mm-hmm. I just blanketed, like, in every time that I've been, in a stage where I've been looking for a literary agent, I would just send to it as many people as possible. And one trick that I found when I was, there's a book, an old book, it's called How to Write Irresistible Query Letters by Lisa Collier-Cool. Mm-hmm. And one trick that she wrote in the book is that if you are rejected, immediately ask the person, do they have a colleague who might feel differently?
Oh, okay.
And that, I mean, I when I was pitching Powder Necklace, I did that a couple times, and a few people, I would say about 25% of people said, you know what, yeah, maybe this person would like it. And then you have somebody, then you can use their name and say, this person suggested that I send my book over to you. And I think one of the things that I learned from all the sort of rejections is that sometimes it's not about the quality of your book or your writing, but the fact that the agent does not have the contacts or relationships to sell your book. So don't take it personally. Just send, to me, I would just say send as widely as possible. Okay. And inform them that, I'm sending this to others as well. Because a lot of agents like to know that, we've sent it here and here and other people are considering it. So that way, if it either causes them to pass quickly so that you're not on tenterhooks waiting for, what do they think? And it also causes them to move quickly if they like what they have read.
How long should a query letter be? How many paragraphs do you think?
I mean, short as possible. One page.
Okay, 1 page.
Or at max.
Okay. So what is one thing you want kids to take away from this book?
I want them to take away that everything has a story. Mm-hmm. Everything that they might take for granted around them has a deeper history, meaning, story behind it. And I want them to feel inspired and empowered to ask questions and follow, the trail of whatever it is they are interested in. Because that's how it started for me.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's great. That's great. So are you working on anything new?
I am, yes. I'm working on several things. I actually have an anthology for adult readers. I have an anthology of African and diaspora writers that is coming out in January 17th, 2023. So I'm very excited about that. It's called Relations. And then I am working on, other children's books and my novel.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So your book coming out in the anthology coming out in January. Is it a collection of short stories?
It's actually a collection of poems, essays, and short stories.
Yeah. So I would like to say a very, very big thank you to you, Nana, for making our time to join us. Thank you very, very much. So everyone, this is Nana Ekua Brew-Hammond, the author of Blue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you, pleasure to have a conversation with you.